Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another week with Barry and myself. How are you, Barry?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So
Yes.
maybe we can demonstrate our show today. Healthy ways to argue.
Yes. Well, let's talk about it first before we dive into the examples, because the thing is, most people's examples of what arguing looks like aren't healthy. Just to be clear,
Oh my God.
especially the way we were raised with our parents or our own relationships. Even watching stuff on the news, the way people mudsling is not a model of healthy arguing. Just to be clear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I mean, oh God, when I think back to how I used to argue, and occasionally still do, I have to confess, occasionally we all slip
Mhm.
up. But it's the recognizing and knowing that and owning it and just say, gosh, I'm so sorry. That wasn't clean. I should not make you responsible for my feelings. This is just the way I feel, and I would like to express how I feel without making you responsible for it. So
Oh yeah,
yes,
my history wasn't pretty either.
say that again. You're what?
My history wasn't pretty either when it came to
Yeah.
arguing.
Okay. So maybe we should use some examples of unhealthy arguing before we do the healthy arguing. So yeah, I've just touched on it. One is when we make our partner responsible for how we're feeling. And
Absolutely.
there's some things that are, people could say, well, hang on a minute, if I've just caught my spouse cheating on me, then yes, their behavior has affected how I feel. And
Hmm.
so, there are some areas that are not so black and white, but how you interpret their actions is how you feel. If you
Absolutely.
take it personally and it's like they, it's an indictment of what they think of you and of your lack of worth or things like that. That's you've added to the behavior. You've put an interpretation on it that can actually hurt you more. It could just simply be that the other person, it had nothing to do with you. It was all to do with their own lack of whatever it was that they were seeking, but
Hmm.
it had nothing to do with you. So that's, I would say that's number one, is taking responsibility for how you're interpreting another person's actions.
It's probably the most pivotal piece. I did a bunch of talks with a friend of mine, God, 4 or 5 years ago, talking about codependency. And one of the things he talked about was the puppet master and using the model. Because the thing about when you blame the other person for how you feel, you're giving them puppet strings to control how you feel. Basically, what we're saying is you're in charge of my feelings, is what you're saying ultimately, even though it doesn't feel like that. That's what you're actually doing. So you're actually programming the conversation to be where you have no control over how you feel anymore because you've given them the power. So it's
Mhm.
like being a puppet on their strings that they control. So, and when people tell people that, they go, "What? Well, no, I don't want that." So the recognition of what we're talking about here is how do you take ownership of your own feelings, regardless of what they did. I should say, witnessing what they did, but not being invested, so that you're actually triggered by, controlled by, and at the mercy of what they did or what they didn't do. So it's a
Exactly.
big piece of work.
Yeah, and one of the other things too is I think a lot of people are afraid to express their upset or their feelings. So what they do is they tank themselves. They push it down and they push it down and they push it down, and then until finally there's one little thing that just flicks you over the edge, and then instead of addressing one situation at a time, you've got this sort of bag full of woes and
Hmm.
complaints and disagreements, and you hurl everything at them at the same time, as
That
opposed to
I've definitely been on the receiving end of before when I was younger. Definitely had partners who did that. So yes, that's not fun.
yeah, that's not fun either. And so yeah, it's really is to just and when things are going well, you really don't want to sort of bring something up. You think, now things are going well, why bring it up now? So you tend to put things off and put things off. And then when you are in an agitated state and you have a grievance to air, you sometimes, like I said, all the other ones join in. But the thing is, it is to actually wait until we are in a settled mood, you know, that when we're feeling settled is when to actually bring up the things, the grievances,
Yeah,
which is very hard. As I say, people are like, no, but things are so great. Why would I upset it? But talking about something that's upsetting to you when you're upset is just, it's fuel on the fire. It's not
well,
going to go well.
it's challenging to be have presence of mind when you're upset, because upsetting is an emotional overload, and your mind is not the place to be living because you're going to be venting and getting stuff out.
Hmm.
There's the thing about arguing oftentimes is, and I remember I was in a workshop with Alison Armstrong. It's gone back years ago now, but it's a co-ed one, and she asked a question about the men about arguments, and men said when a man gets upset, and this became a consensus question. It's like, how do men feel about this? Is in an argument when a man starts to vent and get upset, the thing that happens right after that is he feels ashamed.
Interesting.
Something we have in our wiring is that we, especially with a woman who's quote the weaker sex. I'm using that in air quotes for those who can't see what we're talking about. You're listening on the well, because in the podcast you can't hear me say it, so it's like I'm going to show the air quotes. So for us men, we have to be the protector. So if we basically dump on our partner, we feel so ashamed because we broke our vow, our requirement to be honorable. So it becomes an interesting thing that the men's internal process is very different in some ways than women's are. So
Okay,
there's lots
Gary,
of I
we're
think.
heading for another. I can feel it.
So yeah,
This is where we disagree on things. I I did work with Alison Armstrong many years ago too, and I left there going, oh, it's to me, it's the sort of men are from Mars, the women are from Venus. It's the whole separating men out from women that I sort of have a bit of an issue with. We've talked about this
I
before.
understand. Yes.
Because there are men that are perpetual children. They're men that always want their mothers. So then going to be
Yes.
those types of men. So there are different types of men, as there are different types of women. There are women that want to be the nurturing, mothering, whatever. There's other women that want to be the damsels in distress. There's many roles that all the
Indeed.
sexes play.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, but going back to that, arguing from a clean space, arguing or what we call it arguing, but airing your differences from that neutral place where you're both, both people's well-being is even keeled. There's no heightened emotions. There's no accusing. There's no attacking. There's just simply saying, "This is how I feel from my perspective."
Yeah.
Sticking to
Basically
one
ownership.
subject is usually.
Well, the thing is, I remember we talked about this at USM about the thing about I'm upset because
Hmm.
yes, we get upset, but it's like we tie together the because with the upset, and the thing is, if we just separate them out and say, okay, what is it? What's the because that's triggering in the first place? If you know what it is, and you recognize that you're only getting upset because of something that is whatever that thing is, then you're throwing on top of your partner. It's like when you start to take it apart and realize that when we react to our partner rather than respond, another piece of the difference as well
Hmm.
is we don't have a chance to consciously go, is this really what's going on?
Hmm.
And that is it's a wish for everybody. If we had the ability to pause our reactivity to go, hang on a second, what's really going on before I jump into this like no way back reaction, and then start doing something differently. Because the thing about consciously arguing or being able to do it in a healthy way, as you said, is not so much without the emotion for me. It's more about not the emotion aimed at somebody. Like, don't have that gun pointed at somebody when you're upset. It's like having the ability to sit with it and go, okay, what's triggering me? Why I'm upset? And if you really get deep, you might discover that what happened with your partner that you got upset about, not that they upset you. Because one of the triggers we have is like, no, you did this to me. Like, you upset me. So I'm getting upset because I'm justified, which is the whole messed up excuse. But when we recognize what caused the upset in the first place, could be something happened at work 2 days ago that we didn't deal with, and now we come home and we're still brewing, and our partner says something slightly off key, and we just totally blow up at them for no reason. It seems like to them, because
Hmm.
the truth is it's about them in the first place. So the challenge is, as you said, it's like how do we get to be expressing our upset with consciousness, with awareness, so that we can see what's really going on, and we don't dump it on somebody else. We start taking, okay, what am I getting upset about? Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
That's the
And
right direction.
yeah, and you know what? When you're talking there, I'm thinking it's like Often, the person we're really upset about is ourselves.
Yes.
And I will use that example again of, say, somebody that's violated an agreement that you have, say, take cheating or something like that. Now, yes, it's not, I'm not condoning cheating or saying that you just, that it's always, you take responsibility. It's not like I made them do that. But say your
Hmm.
partner did cheat, and if you are getting really, really angry, it's often because you know that you're faced with a decision, the
Yeah.
decision to stay in the relationship, give them another chance, or whatever it is. And the anger is coming from, why did you put me in this position? I don't want to have to make this choice. I don't want to have to set a healthy boundary. I don't want to have to leave this relationship. All of these feelings are coming about because you really sort of don't like the position that you're in, and you're
Yeah.
angry, and rather than just be loving with ourselves and saying, gosh, this is really hard to navigate, I need to step back a minute and really take care of myself. How do I feel about my partner now? Is this a relationship we can, is it a one-off situation? Is this something we can um, overcome? Is this, whatever reason? But when we take it personally and take it like it was something done to us rather than the other person just acting out of whatever it was, and then we feel helpless, I don't want to have to confront the situation, that can add to the stress levels and the feeling of upset that really has nothing to do with what happened. It's to do with you and how you're processing it.
Well, the other part of that, which is sometimes even before that,
Mhm.
is that the feeling comes up is, why didn't I know? There's the sense of being blindsided by it, not being expecting it, because what's happening is underneath it is a violation of trust.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest pieces we have is when we feel like we can't trust our partner or trust ourselves because we didn't recognize it happening. So it's like the whole stability we thought we had has been shattered.
Yeah.
So that feeling of uncertainty is almost being on thin ice. We can't tell where to step next. We worry about falling through. So it is it's a juicy place, but not a fun place to be. But it's a chance to see a possibility of like, I realized as the partner sort of thing, can I see where I didn't trust myself or trust my partner? Or now this has changed. How can I rebuild trust with myself? Because
Mhm.
again, the relationship with self comes first. So even before you think about your partner, is what about trusting myself have I got to do work on to rebuild that before I even think about what I'm doing with my partner?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pieces to that, absolutely.
No, that's a great example. It's just to look at what is causing that upset, what is causing that pain.
Yeah.
And as you said, it can be so many different things, but to go inside, and especially if we're feeling volatile and we're feeling really heated, I mean, take a step back. I mean, ask for space, go for a walk, calm
Hmm.
down. Like you said, just check inside what is being triggered here, because often our heated emotions, our upset, are, for me, it's always fear. I go straight to it. If I'm upset with my partner about something, and I get agitated, and because I'm a little bit of a fight or flight person, I'll either flee or I'll fight, and
Yeah.
often that fight is usually because I feel the relationship is threatened because we see something so differently. I don't feel safe with my partner, and it could be something so minor, but I see that that is something that gets triggered in me. Is like it's like I go. It's like sort of, what's that expression, like to hell in a handbasket. It's like we might disagree on something that might seem so minuscule in most people's minds, but if I'm in a low mood, it might be make or break for me. It might feel like I don't, you and I are not in sync enough to be in a
Mhm.
healthy relationship. And again, it can be so minor, but in that moment, my fight or flight comes up, and I'm all or nothing, and I get upset and angry. But it's
Yeah.
because, for me, I've taken it so far that the relationship is now threatened. Nobody's threatened it at all. It's my defense
Interest.
mechanism that pops
Yeah. You mentioned something about that go for a walk piece. I want to know something, especially for the men's side of things, because I've heard from some different women I've known over the years about how that when their man got upset with them, how violent it became.
Yeah.
Like, he'd punch a ball or he would storm about or he would throw a fit. Us men, because we tend to be stronger, bigger physically, that's just the way engineering of humanity is our best thing to do when we get upset is to walk away for a second, to not to walk away from the conversation, not to walk away from our partner energetically, but to make some space so we can go do something, whether it's going to go for a walk or go for a run or hit a punching bag or chop some wood, do something physically to start dissipating the energy of the anger, so we can in fact have a conversation with our partner without getting so blinded by the rage that we can't articulate clearly. Because one of the challenges in relationship is she and he, speaking heterosexually, get upset so far that they can no longer maintain any level of equanimity or neutrality or ability to communicate without the emotion overwhelming them. Because women do it so well, they get emotionally flooded as well in this conversation, can do. So having the ability to dissipate some of the emotional um, fogginess so you can see more clearly and communicate clearly is one of the steps to having a healthy way to argue, because we tend to oftentimes get upset first and then don't do anything about the upset, and we're just throwing it out at our partner, like spewing it up at them. So it's not a healthy way to be.
Yeah. And what you're bringing up is two things. Again, it's that it keeps, for me, it keeps boiling down to that taking things personally. You know, I
Hmm.
I used to, in my previous relationship, when things got volatile, I wanted to be alone. I wanted space. I wanted to go to bed and talk about it the next day. Whereas my ex was like, no, we talk about it now. And it'd be like, no, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't know exactly what his thoughts and feelings were about it, but I know some people experience that as abandonment or rejection when the other person doesn't want to talk about anything anymore. And
Yeah.
again, it's like if you're experiencing that as rejection or abandonment, that's your issue. Respect that different people have different needs, and
Hmm.
somebody wants the temperature to be lowered and they want a little bit of distance to calm down. Give them that space. Don't take it personally. Don't say you're ignoring me, you're belittling me, you're not, whatever it is. Just equally so take the space to calm emotions down. And when
Yeah.
often, I mean, I know they have that old adage of, don't go to bed angry. Well, I completely disagree. I think go to bed, sleep on it, wake up the next morning and realize, what on earth was all that about? It wasn't as
Yeah.
good as I thought it was. And
That's the key. Yes.
yeah, and revisit it from a
Hmm.
different perspective. So
It
that's,
is. It is. Just to underscore that point, that's the thing about, again, walking away or sleeping it off is sometimes we need the time, the distance, the space in between the upset and then talking about it so we can actually calm down. And sometimes, yes, sleep is a way through. I used to have the same thing about, you can't go to sleep angry, you got to work it out. That is an interesting, that's a romantic philosophy, but it's not a functional philosophy. So I think the idea you said is true. It may require sleeping in different places,
yeah.
but sleep so you get through so you can be refreshed, because sometimes having the conversation requires a shift of perspective.
Hmm.
And if you don't change the circumstance and the environment, nothing changes. So whether
Exactly.
it's sleeping or taking a walk or do something else, it's a thing you do to break up the upset so you can actually converse and have a conversation. Because a healthy way to argue, frankly, isn't necessarily to argue, but to articulate a conversation so you can communicate what the differences are and what's not working.
Yeah. And then the other one I think is really, really important. And I again, I was guilty of this. I thought that there was a real world out there that we're all looking at. And, why don't you see the world the way I see it? Because it's out there and it's real and it's solid and we're all looking at
Yeah,
the same world. And, what I really grew to see as I got older was, that we do all live in completely separate realities. We all have our own interpretation of the events that are happening out there, and to really honor that, and to just not expect everybody to see the world through your eyes. That everybody's going to see it differently. And
yeah,
again, in a relationship, I do think that it's it's comforting to think that you are aligned in your values and how you only have to look at politics. And I know that it used to be that it didn't really matter what political party you belonged in. People could stay in a relationship, but now it's more divided. So
yeah,
it's harder. So I do think it's important to have shared values and some shared perspectives, but to also really value the differences as well. to see that it adds something to the relationship, that somebody sees the world through different eyes than you. And it's
Absolutely.
okay. It doesn't mean that it's not a good relationship.
Right. And something we talked to earlier, I want to bring up again now, is the thing is sometimes what triggers us and upsets us is something so simple like the toothpaste cap wasn't put back on. That isn't equal to what the upset's about. So the thing is, if you start feeling that really brewing stuff, it's probably the little straw that broke the camel's back type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good thing to go, you know what, let me back up to it. Let me think about what is it that started this whole thing in the first place. When you realize it's something about, oh, she didn't speak the truth, or I didn't speak the truth to her, and I felt like I dropped the ball. And it ended up 3 days later with the toothpaste tube, because that happens. The relationship, it's like cumulative stuff that creates the upset that blows up over the most ridiculous thing because you didn't actually talk about it at the beginning.
Yeah.
So presence of mind, and we talk about self-awareness so much in our podcast, but self-awareness to be checking in to go, okay, what am I feeling disturbed about? Because the other part of this is really the upset or the argument is really the higher level of just having your peace disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
So if my peace is disturbed, what is it that disturbed my peace in the first place? Maybe it's because I got out the wrong side of bed. Maybe it's because there was a flat tire in the car. Meanwhile, I'm taking it out on my partner 3 days later.
Yeah.
That isn't healthy.
No.
So navigate back to what started the things if you can to see what it is that really is underlying it. Can be a journey towards understanding that what I'm getting upset about is nothing to do with anybody else except myself, because 9 times out of 10 it is.
I was just
So
going to, yeah, I was just going to say, if we put as much effort, instead of trying to be sort of get our message across to the other person of why we feel the way we feel, if we put the effort into just getting quiet, going into yourself and doing that exploratory work inside of, okay,
yeah,
so I'm feeling really triggered right now. Is it really about that? What happened before? When did I first start seeing my mood start going down? And often it has nothing to do with your partner. You could
right.
save so many arguments if you just took that time to just really do the self exploring first and just reflecting on what it is that you're really upset about. The
In
other
fact,
I
let's just drop one thing in here, just so they'll be to guess that is there's a phrase that I've heard the same for many, many years, but this is the thing to remember. Are you willing to be right? Or are you willing to be happy?
mm-hmm,
Because oftentimes what we do is we get caught up in the righteousness about what we think is right, being like totally being a bowling ball in an alley, knocking down everything around us, including our partner. What if we're not attached to being right, but rather be loving instead? Because that could change our conversation as well. So I want to add that into the conversation too.
yeah. Well, the other thing, but there's something just to add to that. Don't
Please.
don't that's not to say that we can sit there and go, oh, I'm just going to take the high road and I know I'm right, but I'm just going to be loving right now instead of wrong.
No, not that.
So the next time you have a fight, it's like, oh, and that thing that I let you be right about, no. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. Save them up.
exactly. So yeah, no, it's really, or even better than do I need to be right or to be loving? It's like, am I really right? Or maybe there's other ways to look at this. I might not. Humility, I think, is what I'm saying. Is be a little humble
Right.
and not
Yeah.
so convinced that you are right, but you're going to give the guy a pass or the woman a pass, and as they say, drag it up in the future. But the other thing is also, I mean, there's the classics, obviously, is the I statements, which we've been talking about the whole show, which is
Hmm.
I taking responsibility for how I feel, not how you make me feel. So the
Right.
staying with the I, as opposed to the you. But also, I notice that some people, and this is such a dysfunctional way of fighting and so unfair and so um, um, playing dirty, is when you create that what we call the Greek chorus or the army of like, um, and I'm not the only one that thinks this way. Your family thinks this way, or your friends think this way, and you build this imaginary army to support your argument. And that is just, to me, it's the worst thing you can do to somebody, because it's just so unfair. It's you've got this army of people behind you that you've drawn in to make this other person feel bad about how they behave or how they show up in the world, instead of just saying, I feel this when you do this.
It's almost like building a case against them, and you're going to get these witnesses to prove your point. It's like, why
Yeah.
is that? I mean, is this a relationship or is this a court case now?
My mother used to do that. I'm thinking it's like it was just so painful. It would almost be like, "Mum, just say how you feel. Don't bring everybody else into it." But oh,
Understandably.
I'm sorry, my dog is
I heard something in the background. Yeah.
he's decided he's getting onto my Pilates machine. I don't think so. All right,
Stretching.
little distraction there. Um, yeah, we'll have a little argument when we're off the air. I'll.
I don't know if your dog will stand in position to give you the feedback you need.
Oh, he's a husky Malamute mix. He's got a lot to say. He's always talking. So
Uh, yes, indeed.
amazing. Yeah. So just to recap, I mean, just always, if you feel that you're getting heated, know it's time for timeout. Give yourself a timeout,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean you don't communicate if there's something to be talked, discussed or anything like that. But just and it's so incredible. I noticed too when, as a parent, when I would bring things up with my children when I was in a, say they were heated about something, and I would say, and I join them in that upset emotion. I could just see how defensive we both got. Yet when I observed what had happened but didn't say anything in the moment of upset, and brought it up later when it was calm. And again, it was hard for me because I was thinking, oh, why am I bringing it up now? It's over and done with.
Hmm.
But when I did that, often what I'm trying to say is often because I didn't engage in the heightened situation, that when I thought, okay, I'll leave it till we've calmed down, I didn't even have to bring it up again. They would actually come to me and say, I'm so sorry I did this. When you let things calm down, people have the opportunity to own their own behavior, is what I'm saying.
You have clarity. Yeah,
Clarity.
absolutely.
And they're not in that, when you're attacking, obviously people get defensive and more sort of armor goes up and the arguments escalate. So if you don't engage, if the other person is heated and you let it settle down, often you don't have to bring it up. They'll come to you and say, I'm really sorry. I was out of line then. I was out of order. And you're like,
Right.
what? I didn't have to say anything.
That's a powerful place. The other piece I would also say is if you don't already have this in place for your relationship when you're in one, is have some sort of regular check-in that you have with each other that isn't based upon when you're arguing or anything else. It's
Yeah.
just you say once a week, once a month, whatever you choose to do is an agreement was every couple of weeks. Have a state of the union, so to speak, a conversation. So you can just say, this is what's going on. By the way, I noticed 2 weeks ago I felt like this, and now feeling different. This was so you can take ownership of your part in the relationship,
Yeah.
and you can have a connection. So because that's the thing is upsets happen, and sometimes you have to sort of step aside for a bit, let them settle down a bit. And if you have a check-in that's always scheduled, it can be so much easier to communicate and have that rapport. So you can just say, you know what, I realized I got triggered 3 days ago. That was my stuff. And when you did this, that was what triggered it. Would you be willing to change? Can we work something out that is easier?
Mm.
Because then it's an easier, constructive rather than destructive way of doing things.
I love that you. I was just about to bring this up, and it's so interesting because my one of my teachers, my spiritual teachers, talks about this in their marriage. They have a State of the Union night, which is Tuesdays, where
Hmm.
they just literally set time aside to talk about their union as a married couple, and they happen to work together as well. So
Yeah.
see, things are going to come up that they really do need this weekly check-in. But they said, don't do it on date night. Have a separate date night where it
Yes.
really isn't about airing your grievances or have come up. Make sure that they are two completely separate things. So I think
Hmm.
that's a wonderful idea, actually, just having that state of the union, as in your marriage or your relationship. So yeah, learn to fight clean.
And learn to fight without sharp edges.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Oh my goodness, I know. I often used to, I used to think in my previous relationship, I used to say it was like two porcupines trying to hug and love each other. It was like we were both so prickly and so
Yep.
wounded, I think, in our various ways that it was. If you can try and imagine two porcupines trying to hug each other, it's
Not
yeah.
pretty.
Okay, well, thank you again. That was a great conversation as always, Barry. Thank you, everybody else, and we will see you next week.
Yes, some food for thought. By the way, if you do have questions or thoughts about what we shared, definitely reach out to us. Send messages, comment below the podcast or wherever you see us, because this stuff can stir up things for you. So definitely make sure you consider what we say and take it to heart. We might be actually giving you some good value. You never know.
Exactly. And if you disagree with us,
Let's
note nicely. All right. Take care.
take care.
Bye bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.